Hey everyone, my name's Coast. I'm a 2D and 3D artist who focuses on characters and their stories. In this video, I'll be explaining 4 methods that I use to get through Artblock. Here's some examples I came up with for some of the methods that we're going to go over. But before we begin, I'd like to thank Clip Studio Paint for sponsoring this video. It's the program I will be using to help me traverse the trenches of Artblock. Clip Studio Paint is a drawing software full of many unique features that set it apart from plenty of other art programs. I'm going to be showing you some of the features that I use that help me through Artblock as well. It's my go-to program when creating anything from illustrations to animations. Now, with all that said, no matter where you're at in your artistic journey, there's one challenge we've all collectively experienced, and that is Artblock. But I'm going to help you with that. Now, what exactly is Artblock? It can manifest differently for everyone, but some of the experiences at least I'm familiar with are feeling like your art has gotten worse, feeling like you can't execute your ideas the way you want to, or maybe you feel like your creativity is not present, and then there's a lot of feelings of self-doubt. There is one thing to notice here. All these experiences are feelings and not facts. That's because Artblock stems from emotions. So it's not a measurement of your skills and capabilities as an artist, it's simply a mental block that focuses a lot on being perfect or getting things quote-unquote right. Now, there is a psychology behind Artblock that we can break down. The main thing to remember during this entire process is art is supposed to be fun. But it's hard to have fun when you have so many loud feelings in a system that makes up you. The main parts of self that need focus here are the inner critic and inner child. After all, they are battling the most. So let's start with the inner critic. This is where Artblock stems from. It's the one telling you you're incapable, it focuses on a lot of your mistakes, and puts a lot of self-doubt in you. Of course it's going to feel impossible to perform when you have this loud, curating voice shouting at you the entire time you create. Consider that in its own way, it is trying to help you. All it wants is for you to be better. What it doesn't recognize is its methods of help aren't the most compassionate. Now, for the inner child, this is where all things fun come from. Like, let's look at kids' art for a second here. Despite it not being conventionally good, kids draw just because they can. They do it because it's fun. That having to get it perfect part of self doesn't come in until you're older. So I got a few drawings from when I was a kid. Obviously, I've improved a lot, but back then, I didn't have an inner critic. I didn't care about things like color theory, anatomy, or perspective. All I cared about was creating something and expressing myself. It is absolutely key to connect with this child's self in order to overcome Artblock. Returning to that childhood aspect of play unlocks a freedom in you that goes beyond any inner criticism you face. Keeping those parts of self in mind, we can now move on to the methods of combating Artblock. While you explore these specific methods, always attempt to connect with that childhood aspect of play. Method 1. Redraw Old Art. This is a way to show that critical voice in your head that you're very capable. You pick an old drawing you did a few years ago and redraw it with the new knowledge that you've developed over the years. Chances are, there's been a lot of improvement, and that's something all parts of you can be proud of. I also redesigned the character during this exercise. You don't need to do that, but I had fun doing so. My process has changed too, and that's what I'm going to run you through next. First thing to do is set up your reference of your old drawing. I use the sub-view window to show the reference over my canvas. And then one of the biggest obstacles you face during Artblock is staring at the blank canvas. So I just start with a sketch, which I consider this more of my guide because I don't want to obsess over it looking good. I just need something on the canvas, the very intimidating blank canvas. I can make it better later. And that's what I do next. Guide is down, lines are there. I start sketching on top of it with the lasso fill tool, in tandem with more line work. This way, it helps me build form and explore new shapes while also mapping in the values to plan out color later. You can see me not liking a shape, then quickly drawing over it with lasso fill to try something different. It's quick and easy to read the silhouette that way. I see it almost as if I'm sculpting rather than drawing. Another obstacle of Artblock is deciding on a color palette. So this is where gradient maps come in. In the Edit and Tonal Correction menu, you can find the Gradient Maps option. Since I already put down the values in grayscale, I can now try out different color schemes with ease and find something that really appeals to me. Here I just try out different colors, see what I like, see what I don't, adjust it accordingly as I go. Once I'm happy with the color scheme, I use the selection tool, then use hue, saturation, and luminosity on different selections to fine-tune my choices in color. After I decide on a color scheme, I begin shading, starting with a multiply layer for shadows and an add glow layer for highlights later. I consider this the underpainting, and it helps me figure out where I want the lights and shadow to be before I start painting. I wanted to add a background to this redraw, so I go to the Clip Studio Asset Store and search for 1950s graphics that I can throw into the background to decorate with. So I'm someone who hoards layers to the point that I make my computer lag. Ideally, it's good to just merge things, especially if you're going to paint over it. Like, have no commitment, no regrets. Even after merging, I change things about his designs, and it's all about exploring here. You never have to commit to one decision. As we're reaching the end of the painting, there is one tool that I use constantly, and that is the liquify tool. This can actually be used on multiple layers, which is life-saving. I use it to push shapes or expressions, and even to fix anatomy. And it's done. Now I can sit back and appreciate all those changes that have happened over the years. Here's the thing, actually. My inner critic isn't completely happy with this redraw. It thinks I could do better, but that's okay. To have this negative voice, it's actually an insightful feeling that leads into the next topic, and that is method 2. Make bad art. Yes, make bad art. In my opinion, this is the most effective way to deal with art block, because the previous drawing was done with the intent for it to be good. So there's going to be some mental pressure to perform well, but what happens if we draw with the intent for it to be purposefully bad? What if we take the pressure off trying to make something we like and instead make ourselves laugh with something that we don't consider up to our standards of skill? For the next drawing, I release all expectations of it being conventionally good and just see where my hand takes me, just like a kid would do. To add a little bit more fun to this piece, I activate color jitter in my brush's settings. I turn the hue slider to about 26 and the saturation slider to 9. This allows me to get a variety of hues while only using one color. It's very similar to those color-changing crayons that kids love. For some reason, when I was a kid, I'd always draw a sun in the corner of the scene with a smoothie and sunglasses, so I made sure to add that to this piece. It's actually really helpful because it allows me to connect with that child self here. So I encourage you to try to remember some things you drew as a kid and to draw them here, but don't draw them better. Still make them look silly. I loved this exercise. It was extremely cathartic. The drawing is silly and nothing like my other work, and that's why it's fun. I had no plan going in, I simply drew the first thoughts that came to my mind. Dropping any expectations for it to be good, this allowed my inner critic to step away, giving me more space to create something fun. And it's not even bad per se, it's pretty cute, it's just not what I would usually draw. The thing to notice too is I like it, because I didn't have expectations to perform well. However, there may be times when you catch yourself trying to make it good or correct. For example, I could not get myself to be happy with this frog, so I kept redoing it, but that was not helpful in this particular exercise. Simply notice what's happening. I see you, inner critic, over there, kind of bossing me around, and then return to the childhood aspect of play. And it's done. Really reminds me of the types of drawings I would do as a kid. I feel freer and less pressure on my shoulders because of it. The third method to fight art block is making reimagined studies. I'm someone who does not like doing studies, it feels like a chore to me, but I have to admit doing art studies of photos or master artist work is a great way to get out of art block. It allows you to brush up on your art fundamentals and get in some art mileage. Knowing that it feels like a chore sometimes, how can we incorporate some fun into the study process? Studying, but with a twist. If you're someone with original characters, change the subject to be one of your characters, or you can change the scene, the lighting, or add something new that's not in the original image. This way you don't need to work as hard on art fundamentals while still having some creative freedom while studying. And now the last method is try something new. You can try adding a new technique to your workflow. Some examples are trying a different art style, or a new brush or tool you've never used before. It's important to be curious and explore. The Clip Studio Asset Store is great for the latter. This is an excellent tool for battling art block because you're pulling from the creative minds of other people to find inspiration. This means you get to essentially think outside of your comfort zone and step away from your own inner critic. You can filter through brushes, gradient maps, materials, 3D models, and many other assets. There are plenty of assets available for free, but you can also spend Clippy points to download those that aren't. For this exercise, I downloaded some new oil paint brushes from the asset store. I'll include a link in the description to those. I primarily used the thick oil paint and oil sketch brushes from this set for this piece, but it includes plenty of other brushes to explore with. Using them added a lot of texture to my painting that a lot of my other work doesn't usually have. Once I start painting, I try a completely different approach. I skip line art, block and shape, stick to only one brush, and also try a new shading technique. This technique involves me using blending modes on the brush itself rather than on separate layers. There's less wiggle room this way, because it's a destructive technique, but that's great for exploration. You can activate this feature in your brush's settings under the ink menu. The two modes I used primarily were multiply and add glow. That brings us to the end. Artblock is unavoidable, and that can be really scary. But Artblock isn't necessarily a problem either. Instead, it's an opportunity. You're struggling now, so you can prove in art later. But if you have the proper tools ready to fight through it, then it shouldn't be too hard to overcome either way. The best thing to do is explore. Try out these techniques, and maybe along the way, you will create your own methods of battling Artblock too. There's never a wrong way to go about it, and building off one another as a community is exceptionally helpful. Remember to have fun, explore, and always connect with that childhood aspect of play. Thanks for watching, and thank you Clip Studio Paint for making this video possible. Keep on creating despite what that inner critic says. See you guys next time.